Hello and welcome to Framingham Now. I'm Jack Patrick Lewis, state representative for the town of Ashland and one of the reps right here in Framingham. As many of you know, we lost one of our town's greatest advocates in Rep. Chris Walsh just a few months ago. Chris advocated for Framingham and loved this town so much. And there's a loss that Framingham's feeling. What we're doing today is we're continuing the conversation about many of the issues that were important to Chris because his district needs representation. It needs an advocate. And I'm excited to continue to celebrate Chris's life and the things that were of interest to him, while also getting to know some of the candidates running to advocate for the same people that Chris so loved. Today on the show, we have Mike Gatlin, who is running for state rep in this not a special election, this special race that's a write-in, but we'll get to that later. But this election that's coming up right here in September. Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off by asking the question on everyone's mind. It was a question my kid asked me when I ran. Why do you want to be state rep?
Well, I grew up in this town. I raised my family in this town. I practiced law in this town. My whole life has been spent in this town. I love this community. I love the diversity. I love the fact that you're 25 minutes away from Boston or Worcester, so you're relatively close to urban centers, but you can look out your backyard and have deer and wild turkeys walking.
Coyotes, don't forget coyotes.
Coyotes as well. I just think it's a really interesting, really diverse, and just great community. I've spent a lot of my life working in service to the community in various volunteer capacities. This just seemed like a great opportunity to take that interest and those efforts to a different level and to represent the city on Beacon Hill.
If you're elected, one of the things you're going to be working on and hear from folks about are taxes.
Yes.
And there's something that I loved talking about on the campaign trail, and I continue to like to talk a lot about. But specifically on taxes, we have a flat income tax here in Massachusetts. Right. There was a proposal that will not be on the ballot box, or in the ballot box in November, right, that would have created an additional tier for incomes over $1 million, right, bringing in about $2 billion annually for education and transportation. And while that won't be on the ballot this November, I'm curious what your own thoughts are about our state's income tax and what we can do to ensure that these essential services are funded.
Well, I think the millionaire's tax that you described there is a really interesting and worthwhile proposal. The Supreme Judicial Court, as you know, struck it down. My understanding of it, having read the decision, is a lot of it had to do with draftsmanship. I'm not certain that it is inherently unconstitutional. It was just unconstitutional in the way that it was drafted. I would really like to take another look at that because I think it is an opportunity to provide a significantly larger income stream. It will not, by definition, affect lower income families. It will not, by definition, affect middle income families. It will affect those who are most capable of paying an increased tax. And interestingly enough, here and in other states, it's been enacted in parts of New York and New York City. Some of the biggest advocates for that tax have actually been millionaires. Warren Buffett has famously pointed out that he pays fewer taxes than his administrative assistant. So I would be very much in favor of that. I think it is a win for everybody.
One of the other things I hear from constituents about is while the state provides support to its residents, that those supports are often not adequate in order to bridge the gap between what a family has and what they need. And I'm curious what your thoughts are about helping folks, the working poor, lower income folks, ensure that they have the resources and services they need so that they can not only survive, but ideally thrive,
right,
and live into their fullest potential as well.
Well, I think that is an issue that we tend to think of in terms of being the very lowest rung of the economic ladder. I think it's actually perhaps a little more complex than that. If you are in the service industries, if you drive a cab, if you work in a restaurant, if you work in those kinds of jobs, even if you're making minimum wage, that may be insufficient to adequately shelter your family, just because the cost of housing in Massachusetts and then heating that housing after you've obtained it is so incredibly high. So we need to take a good hard look at some of the housing options that are out there. I know, for example, I did some volunteer work a few years ago in New Orleans, right after Hurricane Katrina. And there was a section of the city where they were building housing specifically for artists who are, in the real world, probably not making a lot of money, but they are seen to be a valued member of the community in New Orleans. And the city made the decision that it made sense, since we're remaking the whole city after the hurricane anyway, to provide affordable, and by affordable I don't mean less than $500,000, I mean significantly less than that, housing for people who really make the local economy run, but who may be priced out of being able to live here. So I think that's one thing we need to take a look at is affordable housing costs. I think that we need to take a look at providing adequate, safe, affordable childcare. I think that even if you have a job, childcare can eat up a significant portion of what you are getting paid. And there's some real disincentives sometimes to be able to take on extra hours, overtime, those kinds of things which would help raise your income level, because you have no place and no one to leave your child. So I think that that's something we need to take a look at too. I know that that's been an issue that people have talked about for years. I think we need to address it seriously.
In that same vein, a couple weeks ago, the Massachusetts Pay Equity Act went into force. But I am very aware that even though it's Massachusetts, even though we passed pay equity legislation, even though it's 2018, that pay equity when it comes to gender and race still requires a lot more work. And I'm curious, as a state rep, what you would do, where you put your energy to ensure that two people who have the same job, who put in the same amount of energy and hours, aren't paid radically differently based on the color of their skin or their gender.
Right. Well, interestingly enough, back when I was in law school in 1982, I wrote and had published a law review article that dealt specifically with the issue of wage discrimination against women in the workplace. Wage discrimination is a very complex issue, whether you're talking about based on gender or based on color. I think that one thing that we need to do is to make it illegal for an employer to ask a job applicant how much they made in a previous job. The job that they're applying for has a value. It has a value to that employer. What you were paid in your previous job has nothing to do with that. But that has historically been a way where employers have been able to give somebody who was making a small salary a small kick so that they will take the job, but not an amount that is reflective of how the employer values that job. And those kinds of pay inequities get built into the system. Again, I think we need to be able to provide safe, adequate, affordable childcare, because that is a place where a lot of this other stuff breaks down. If people are not available to take overtime, or they don't have a place to put their child at all and have to take time off from work, that's a problem. It affects their ability to earn money. It may affect their standing with their employer. It builds in a lot of pay inequity, and we need to address that.
I want to change gears some and talk about the environment, something that is on the news every passing day, something very close to my heart. We in Massachusetts are fortunate. We've set these ambitious reduction standards. By 2030, we're going to do this. By 2040, this, 2050. And I celebrate that, but I also, like many people, can't fathom the year 2050. It's like saying by the year 2300, we're going to do it. It's so far down the road that I worry that we're not doing enough right now, because we know that likely you and I won't be the ones held accountable in 2050. I don't even, will I be around? Who knows? I don't even want to do the math. Yeah. What are your thoughts on what the legislature could and should be doing right now to encourage green jobs, to fight global warming, to make sure that we actually meet these ambitious reduction standards?
Well, I agree with you that these standards are something we should be shooting at. I absolutely agree with that, but that's only part of my answer, because like you, I believe that those standards are far too generous, far too lax. We are effectively kicking the can down the road on climate change. A 20% reduction in a few years still means that 80% of the pollutants that are out there are continuing to adversely affect the environment. At some point, the environment's ability to absorb that without leading to disastrous change is going to become an issue. And we see those changes taking place already. My feeling is that we need to be far more aggressive in reducing what is acceptable. I think there are a number of ways of doing that. I think that, for one thing, we must get serious about public transportation. Public transportation is just difficult in this state for a whole range of reasons. There are cost factors related to the running of the MBTA. I think that Ed Carr does a great job with the MWRTA, but again, these things are underfunded, particularly the MWRTA. At the same time, you have the MBTA trains coming out here to Framingham. They're hopelessly unreliable. Conductors don't even collect fares someday if the train is full, going back to the state for subsidies because they're not making enough money. If they just collected their fares, they'd be in better shape. All of that leads to an idea in the public's mind that public transportation is a pain in the neck and not worth the hassle. So we need to get serious about funding public transportation, not just the MBTA, our own MWRTA. But in addition to that, I think we need to really focus some attention on using alternative energy sources. It's clean. Ultimately, it's cheaper. We're paying some of the highest energy costs in the country right here in Massachusetts because we're at the far end of the supply line. And by making these transitions, we also create local jobs. If you put solar panels on your roof, you're reducing your utility bills. And the person who puts those panels on your roof has a job. And the person who puts those panels on your roof bought the panels from somebody who manufactured them. As these things become more common, the price goes down, pollution goes down, jobs become more available. So to me, this is a win-win situation for everybody, and it comes down to ultimately meeting those pollution reduction standards, in my view, at a far more aggressive rate.
Excellent. I couldn't agree more. And I think we as a society and we as a Commonwealth have a responsibility to play a role in that by incentivizing things like green energy jobs. I want to talk a little about education.
Yes.
The Commonwealth prides itself in having this wonderful public education system. I'll tell you, I get nervous anytime we congratulate ourselves because it means that we feel like we've arrived potentially at a level of excellence while other states are striving to do better.
Right.
And I'm sorry, I don't care that we're doing a whole lot better than states on the other side of the country that don't invest the money we put into education. And I'm curious what your thoughts are when it comes to our public education system, what could be done to better, what responsibility we have to our residents, because our public education is funded by tax dollars. And I believe that it's an investment in the future generation that we all collectively have a responsibility to. And when we don't do that and do it well, we fail our children. But you've had kids that have grown up in the area.
I have 3 of whom I am very proud. All graduates of the Framingham Public School System, so a shout out to the Framingham Public School System. Education has really been a main topic of discussion in my campaign. As I've said on a few occasions, in my view, Massachusetts has 2 assets, cranberries and brains. We need to do everything we can to protect and encourage the brains. It's a question of fairness with respect to our kids. Our kids deserve the best education that we as a community and as a state can provide them. But in addition to that, it is what drives the Massachusetts economy. People come to Massachusetts to get an education. People come to Massachusetts to set up their businesses because there are a lot of very good schools that provide a very talented, very well-trained labor force. That is the competitive edge that we have here in Massachusetts, and we need to maintain that. To that end, I think we need to look very, very seriously and very quickly about making pre-K education available to everybody, particularly in a community like Framingham, which has such a diverse population, which I view as a strength. If you come from a family where English is not the primary language spoken at home, if you come from a family that is economically disadvantaged, your kids are probably not getting pre-K education. So by the time they get into kindergarten, they are 2 years behind their peers. That's a terrible thing to do to a 5-year-old. And it creates a disadvantage that statistics indicate will follow you right through your entire educational career. You will not catch up in all likelihood. And furthermore, the kids who are in kindergarten with you and have had the advantage of pre-K education probably are getting less out of their pre-K education and probably beyond, because the teacher has to teach to a common ground, a level of common understanding. So everybody is kind of being put in a position of underperforming. We need to fix that. It's a question of equity. It's also a question of quality. In any community, property values are protected in part by the quality of their school system. I think we do a great job here in Framingham. Pre-K education would help add to that. And if I could go on for just a little bit longer, at the other end of the educational scale, college is a huge, huge requirement. Having put 2 kids completely through college and my little guy, who is about to become a senior, I can tell you a little bit about college tuition. I'm sure that you and most of the viewers probably saw the article in the Globe a couple weeks ago about the fact that the state university system is passing up our own kids who are perfectly well qualified. They are extraordinary students. They've got good grades, they've got good SAT scores, but unfortunately, when they go to a state university, they pay $18,000 a year.
Which is already a huge number.
Exactly, that's a whole other issue.
Yes.
But if you've got a university system that's struggling to make ends meet, and you have the choice between taking a really good kid at $18,000 or an adequate kid at $32,000, which way are you going to go? So our kids are getting shut out of our own college system. That's not right. A few years ago, 10 years ago, not even that long ago, 10 years ago, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts paid 80% of the cost of the running of the state college system. That number is down to 20%. And that is why we have to take, or the universities feel that they have to take, the out-of-state kids to make up that shortfall. The Commonwealth needs to honor its commitment to its citizens by getting back to realistically funding the cost of running the university system. Again, it's the cranberries and brains thing.
You talked all about brains, but I want to make sure you defend cranberries as well.
Cranberries are wonderful.
Okay,
I love them.
you're
I love them.
As a
Absolutely.
freshman
My
rep,
wife makes a homemade cranberry sauce. I'm telling you,
I have this dream of putting on the little pants and going into the bog. Like, it's one of my life goals to be able to go into the.
I'm with you on that. I don't know why, but that just seems like a fascinating thing to do.
It's like leaf peeping, like in apple picking and cranberry.
They got those 2 guys who do the commercial. I'm thinking,
yes.
I could do that.
I could be that guy.
Absolutely.
Fall back for this. Fall back. So, looking at the clock, we don't have very much time left, but I've invited the candidates to join me in a new component of the show, a lightning round, where I ask complex questions and invite you, require you to answer yes or no.
Okay.
In politics, a lot of the things we believe start as strong convictions. As an elected official, there are conversations and compromises and amendments. But at the end of the day, you're faced with a bill, and you have to vote yes, no, or pretend to be absent and just abstain.
Right.
So while these are complicated ideas, curious if you could try.
Sure.
If I ask you if you like puppies.
I love puppies.
You love puppies. The answer is yes. You like ice cream?
I love ice cream even more than puppies.
Okay. Or just yes for both of those would be the correct answers. There's talk in the Commonwealth of requiring companies that receive tax credits to pay a living wage to their employees and to provide adequate benefits. Would you support such legislation?
I would.
Do you support single-payer health insurance?
I do, actually.
Do you, if elected and are invited by a union, would you join workers on a strike, fighting for better working conditions?
Yes, I would.
Do you support the president's current policy banning immigrants and visitors from certain countries?
Absolutely, irrevocably not.
Do you support a woman's right to choose?
I absolutely do.
Do you support the death penalty?
I don't.
Do you support allowing citizens to register and vote on election day?
I do. I think we've got to make voting as accessible to people. That's what this whole system is about.
We That was more than one word there, but it's all right. Lightning
sorry.
will strike if you say more than 2 or 3.
All right.
Just be warned. We passed legislation. The next couple are about legislation we passed, increasing minimum wage to $15 an hour earlier this year. Would you have voted yes?
Yes.
We banned conversion therapy for minors. Would you have voted yes?
Absolutely.
We also created and passed a paid family medical leave program that our great Senator Karen Spilka has been championing. Would you have voted yes?
Yes.
We also passed an extreme risk protection order as it relates to gun safety. Would you have voted yes?
Yes.
And lastly, the Safe Communities Act. Do you support it?
I do.
I'm looking at the time. I think we have time to go back to the original list of questions.
Sure.
In order to be fair and equitable to all the candidates, I've given you the questions in advance, and I'm trying my best to ask them in as fair of a fashion as possible. I'm curious if we could talk about criminal justice reform.
Yes.
We passed a major omnibus bill earlier this year, but I'm curious if you have thoughts on what we can do to improve our criminal justice system.
Well, I'm very much in favor of what was done. I think that the criminal justice system just really needs to be updated. I think that, for example, what you did with respect to bail is it's just justice. People shouldn't have to spend time in jail awaiting their trial if they are indigent because they can't raise the bail to get out. They're not doing anybody any good in jail. It's costing money. They're not able to work at a job. And because of circumstances, they are put in that position. If they're going to show up for court, if you're comfortable going to show up for court, posting bail shouldn't be necessary. Things like talking about sympathetic, or I'm not sure that this is the proper word, people who are serving a term, are not a threat to anybody, are in poor health. I think letting those people out to live out their days at home is a fair, humane thing to be doing.
It also saves the Commonwealth
And it's
a lot of
saved,
money.
I hate to couch it in those terms, but a lot of these things do have that result. When you talk about some of the decriminalization provisions that are in the statute, in the bill, there are people right now who are doing time for violating laws that we have since revoked. I mean, if you've got a marijuana violation, well, sorry guys, sorry you're in jail. We just made that legal. That's a crazy situation. So my bet is we probably can even modernize the criminal justice system more. We've got to get the race consideration out. It should be a fair system for everybody, and we need to work much harder in that regard.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. You're
Thank you for
out
having
there,
me.
you're knocking on doors. I'm seeing your signs popping up all over town. I like to ask everyone in closing the same question.
Yep.
Someone like yourself, you're running for elected office. You now can't go to Trader Joe's without somebody being like, you're that guy who was at my door yesterday.
Right.
Who are you again? Your personal life is no longer your own. You're out there knocking on doors, and if you're elected, this is a time-consuming, demanding job. And I like to think that people who put themselves out there to run, that it doesn't just say something about themselves, but there's something about the town in which, or in this case, the city of Framingham, in which they live, that they're willing to advocate for. So in closing, what is it about Framingham that makes it the sort of place that you call home, you have long called home, but you're willing to put yourself out there to advocate for?
I just think it's the greatest community in the Commonwealth. I am so proud to be here. I am so proud that I've been able, during most of my life, to be able to offer my time and talents, whatever they might be, to the community. You know, this is kind of an indirect answer, but I'm going to give it anyway. When I first started this campaign, I said to my wife, you know, the part that's going to be hard is going door to door. That's just really going to be, of all of the things, that's the part I'm looking forward to the least. I have to tell you, in all honesty, it's been the best part, because you get to meet the people. You get to meet the people at their house. You get to meet the people with their kids and with their dogs and whatever else they've got. And it has convinced me, even more than ever, that the people of this community are the best people in Massachusetts. I would love to have the opportunity to represent them, and I'm glad to have had this opportunity to meet with them.
Excellent. So I'm going to remind folks how they can vote for you, and if I get it wrong, correct me,
You
because
bet I will.
it's a little complicated.
It is.
September 4th is the primary.
That's correct.
And so folks who want to vote for you will go to where they always vote and get a primary ballot. If they're unenrolled in a party, they can either get a Democratic or a Republican ballot. If they're a Democrat, then they'll get the Democrat ballot. And if you're a Republican, the Republican ballot. But if they want to vote for you, you're running in the Democratic primary. And so Democrats and unenrolled who want to vote for you need to ask for the Democratic ballot. And they're not going to find your name on it, though.
That's right.
They're not going to find anybody's name under the position of state representative.
Right.
You're all running write-in campaigns. And so for folks who want to support Mike Gatlin, you need to go down to the place where it says state representative and fill in the bubble next to the blank line and literally write in Mike Gatlin.
That's correct.
Did I get that right?
That's correct. We also will make stickers available to people who've identified themselves as supporters and who are interested, which will help a little bit. But yes, I'm told by the city clerk's office that as long as they can determine the voter's choice, then they will honor that choice. But in terms of your summary of what's going to happen, that is exactly correct.
So you fill in a little bubble and then either put a sticker with your name on it or write the name in. And I'm guessing we won't know results instantaneously.
I expect it'll be a long night.
Yes. If folks want to get to know you or get to know your campaign better, what should they do? Where can they go?
You can start by going to my website, mikegatlin.gov. I'm sorry, mikegatlin.org.
Oh, you've already given yourself a promotion.
I know. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Mikegatlin.org. I'm not the most social media savvy person. My daughter is running my campaign, and if it's anything that even looks like it's internet related, I kick it over to her. MikeGatlin.org.
There we go.
Is the proper, and that's a good place to start. You can volunteer from there. You can see what we're doing, see what I am about, and I think it's a good place for voters to start developing a relationship. And I'm also going door to door. If I haven't hit you yet, I will soon.
Yes, for folks that live in Chris Walsh's district, this 6 Middlesex, look out your front door because there's a good chance that one of these candidates is probably walking up the steps.
Or maybe don't look out your front door because if we see you, you know we're not going to go away. So
that is true. It brings back such great memories of
Yes.
door knocking where
Yes.
you hope you don't wake up too many babies. You hope you don't interrupt too much dinner. And it's those conversations where you're invited in for a cup of tea or some lemonade on the porch swing are the ones that I most remember.
Yes.
Folks that you're meeting them where they are, literally at their house. And no one sits around waiting for somebody to knock on the door and sell solar panels
Right.
or talk about their run for elected office. But people have hopes and dreams.
Right.
And when they're invited to talk about them, if you're elected, you're going to be the one that's responsible for advocating for them.
That's right.
And so thanks for running. Thanks for going out on the doors, campaigning. For those watching at home, I'm interviewing all of the candidates that have currently declared a run for this seat. September 4th, the Tuesday after Labor Day, there will be an election. And if you're interested in these candidates, feel free to watch all of my interviews that are available. Feel free to look them up on the internet. And remember, when you go to vote on September 4th, their names will not be on the ballot. So either bring a sticker with their names on it or write it down and write it on the ballot. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.